Okay. So welcome everybody to the World Migratory Bird Day webinar series. This is a new series that we've done this year where each episode we had once a month, focusing on a call to action throughout this campaign. So thank you for being here and for joining the conversation and learning more about how to become more bird friendly. Coming up, we have our closing ceremonies for World Migratory Bird Day 2025 on November 20th. And this will be a really great event where we'll highlight a lot of the World Migratory Bird Day events throughout the year, as well as our Outstanding Educator Awards. We'll thank our sponsors. We'll have a behind the scenes look from the artist this year as well. And we'll also be announcing our theme for next year's World Migratory Bird Day. So put that on your calendars. It's going to be a really fun event. So my name is Alex. I'm the Communications Manager of Environment for the Americas, and we are a nonprofit organization that works internationally and all across the Western Hemisphere, connecting people to nature and to birds and conservation. We facilitate World Migratory Bird Day, which is our flagship education and conservation campaign. And we do this with our global partners, the Convention on Migratory Species, the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership, and we create materials and host events all across the world to spread conservation messages and ways to protect birds, like this webinar that you're at today. Our mission values for our organization, oh, sorry, can you go back? The mission values of our organization are conservation and inspiring bird conservation across the Americas through research and education, providing materials and bilingual materials all across the world, and protecting our habitats and inspiring the next generation of conservationists. And if you'd like to learn more about Environment for the Americas or World Migratory Bird Day, you can visit us at environmentamericas.org or migratorybirdday.org. So thank you to our sponsors. This wouldn't be possible without them, especially our global flyway partners, the U.S. Forest Service and the National Park Service, as well as our title sponsors, partners in flight, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and Feather Friendly. And a particular shout out to the Smithsonian and Feather Friendly this year, who sponsored two of our webinar series, one on shade-grown coffee, bird-friendly coffee, and then one on window collisions from Feather Friendly. So we also rely on individual contributions, just like from people like yourself. And every dollar goes a really long way. And there's plenty of ways to support us. You can sponsor a webinar, you can provide translations, or you can send an event kit for World Migratory Bird Day to a community who's requested it in Latin America. We also accept mileage donations from flights and different airlines. So if you are interested in doing that, reach out at info@environmentamericas.org. And there's other ways that you can contribute, but if you would like to learn more or donate to Environment Americas today, you can visit us at environmentamericas.org/donate. So a little bit about World Migratory Bird Day. World Migratory Bird Day started in 1993, and EFTA took over the organization of the campaign in the early 2000s, and we adopted a theme approach. So each year we have a different theme focusing on either a threat to birds or a way that we can use conservation to protect migratory birds. And so last year we had the theme of insects, and prior to that, the theme of clean water and plastic pollution. And so this year's theme was creating bird-friendly cities and communities, which is a really great theme because it kind of wraps a lot of these call to actions together as one big, powerful theme for this year. So here you can see the poster from this year's campaign, our Shared Spaces, Bird-Friendly Cities and Communities campaign. And this poster was drawn by our artist, Ana Maria Savarino from Mexico. And one thing that's really nice about this poster is we've used it as an educational tool as part of some of just the materials that we create to distribute around the world. And so you can see in the poster that there's different calls to actions that were highlighted during this campaign, everything from the shade-grown coffee to preventing window collisions and keeping cats indoors. And so this is just a great example of some of the materials that we create for World Migratory Bird Day. And if you'd like to order any of these materials, You can find them at environmentamericas.org, migratorybirdday.org, and you can also find free downloadable resources and educational materials like the ones in these photos being used in Colombia and Venezuela for their World Migratory Bird Day events. So today we're talking about policy for birds, and we've got a great panel for you. And so the way that this webinar will run is that we'll have 4 presenters who will each speak for about 10 or so minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer section at the end where you are welcome to drop your questions into the chat that we can bring up during the session. We can also respond to them into the chat during the session, or you can also raise your hand using the React button at the bottom of your browser. And if you would like to ask your question live at the end, that is also encouraged. So with that, I will introduce our first speaker. Is Fernando in here, Lauren?
I am
Okay,
here.
great. Okay, great. So Fernando is an astrophysicist and science communicator at Mexico's National Astronomical Observatory. As the head of the Dark Skies Law Office, they lead a national effort to reduce light pollution through education, policy, and collaboration with all levels of government. A recipient of the Dark Sky Defender Award, Fernando has helped pass multiple dark sky laws and continues to promote sustainable lighting across Mexico. Fernando, the floor is yours.
Hi, well, first of all, I'm very honored to be invited to be part of this wonderful event. I'm not also going to share what I've learned, but also I want to learn from you because as you will see, there's a lot of things in common that we have. So to start, we're going to go fast with the slides, so we'll start with the next slide, please. As I was saying, I work at the National Astronomical Observatory here in Baja California, Mexico, in the northwest part of the country. It's a wonderful place. It's one of the top places in the world for optical astronomy observation. And it's great because, next slide, please. We have extraordinary conditions. Even with a smartphone, you can take awesome pictures of the Milky Way during the summer nights. And talking about the Milky Way precisely is one of the things that precisely shows how polluted is our world. 80% of the world, 4 out of 5 persons, can no longer see the Milky Way at naked eye during the summer. And that's because lately, in the past 12, 15 years, the sky brightness at night has been increasing almost by 10% per year. And that is a very worrisome number. It's really concerning us. Us astronomers are scared about this fact. But well, precisely the Astronomical Observatory, we've seen this increase from the neighboring towns and cities, as you can see on the next slide. The dome lights of the cities are rising all over the horizon in every direction. That's why almost 20 years ago, we started working with the 3 levels of government, trying to reduce the growth of the cities, especially the light. And this is a small recount of what we have achieved so far. We have city ordinances in 3 of the major municipalities in the state, Ensenada, Mexicali, Tijuana, but also work with 2 state laws. One is the environmental law, and the other is the urban development law. They have different approaches. One tries to prevent, which is the urban development, trying to work with the builders, with the government planners. And environmental, well, sometimes things are not perfect and we have to act afterwards. But the recent news, the most important news, is what we've done at the national level. Next slide, please. We started in 2017, almost 8 years ago, with a work with astronomers, researchers, government. We managed to include in the environmental federal law the excess of artificial light at night as a pollutant. We also included the definition of light trespass. And with that, since 2021, we've been working to get a new official technical norm in light control. And this is going to be important. We hope to get it ready by next year. We have a very advanced draft. We still need to check with other government branches and with the private business, but it's very, very much advanced. So as you see, we work a lot with the government, city, state, country level, and we had a success promoting this ordinance. And that's precisely what they asked me for me. What I've learned about trying to get all these ordinances and laws promoted. and how can we extend? The first thing we learn is that you have to make friends with the media. The press is always there to denounce any problems, environmental impacts. Next slide, please. Environmental impacts, but also when government projects are not done right. If they got too expensive, if they got with some irregularities, the press will be ready to show what is being done. The environmental part is also something that sells, and that's why the media is a really great friend to show all these issues. Next slide, please. However, it's not only about complaining, it's not only showing what is done wrong. If you want to advance, you need to provide a solution. It's not all about complaining how things could be better, it's about showing how they can improve. Our case here in Ensenada, where the office of the observatory is located, we had an issue 10 years ago. The city had only a coverage of 2/3 of the streets. So Ensenada was a dark, but not in the good way, not in the way that everybody benefits. One of the main problems was the cost. For Mexican standards, the cost per light was too high. But there was also a lot of pressure from the public because they had a perception, this is an important word, perception of insecurity. So we can complain, we can show what are the problems, but we work to provide a solution. Next slide, please. We worked with the engineer department of the state university. We tried to get an idea first of how things were, which type of lights the city had, and how they can be improved. We went from 17,000 lamps to 25, almost a 50% increase. The project took 2 years to implement because it started with the engineering department. Next slide, please. Working house streets needed to be uniformly lighted. We needed to show where the parts that had a more benefit, for example, crossroads compared to other parts, touristic areas, but also residential areas needed their own type of lighting. So we worked the project from start to finish, took 2 years, I was saying. Next slide. And well, the picture is not really showing, I think, but you can see several light domes before the change. And on the next slide, you can see, hopefully, because I can see it on my screen, that the Ensenada's light dome actually shrank. Even if we went from 17,000 lights to 25,000, a 50% increase, the light dome was reduced. That meant that most of the light that the city was producing now was mostly contained to the urban area. And this is a big win in terms of light pollution and light trespass. Next slide. And it wasn't only about providing a solution, it was a solution for everybody, not just for the observatory, as we could see in the previous picture that the contribution of Ensenada Light Dome was reduced. It was a benefit for everybody in the city. Next slide. We focus in terms of government finances, they're going to save energy. And they did. They had a 50 to 60% of energy savings after the new system was installed, because now lighting was more uniform. There were no shadows, no glare. So visibility and safety were improved, something that is very important for the people, for the citizens. And also we had a great contribution for wildlife protection. Also, noctourism, which includes asotourism, which is the most known form of tourism at night, but also wildlife experiences at night got benefited with this. Next slide, please. So this took a lot of work. At the beginning, I was saying was mostly astronomers, but to achieve this, you need to create a community with many disciplines. Next slide. In our city ordinance, we have contributions from the architects board, the engineering board, and of course, environmental groups. Of course, the presence of media, as I was saying at the beginning, is really important. The environmental groups, for example, next slide, is something that started a few years ago. Turns out the Baja California Peninsula not only has the observatory, but it's a natural path for migratory birds, as these Canadian geese travel all the way from Canada through the coast of the Pacific. They actually pass by Ensenada, we found out, because we're working with the university environmental area, the environmental group, And they show us where are the critical points of this migratory path. And the last year, we've been working with them to improve our city ordinance, trying to give extra protection to these areas so they can have dark spots at night where they can rest while they continue their migration travel. Next slide. We also approach the builders and makers. We're working with the engineering schools at college level, with the architects, with the designers, show them what are the best practices in responsible lighting. Next slide. But also, during all this process, you also need to learn how to negotiate. Even if we had a big improvement from Ensenada before the change to after the change, 2 years later, there were still a lot of things that couldn't achieve. If we insisted to get everything perfect from the beginning, then nothing would have happened. Everything would be stalled, nothing would have changed, and sometimes could have been even worse. Yes, we had energy savings after the first stage. We recommended warm lighting. They went with cooler lighting against our advice. But now, because everything was darker in general sense, now, for example, electronic billboards were more visible. But we managed in this negotiation to say, okay, if it's not possible because the warmer lights are more expensive now, let's make a deal. Let's put in the code that after the life of these new lights ends, we will migrate to warmer lights. Next slide, please. So the lesson here was that perfection sometimes is the enemy to get anything done. You have to set some priorities, you have to negotiate, you have to set some stages in this path to achieve what you want. And well, what happened? Precisely this year, we're starting to replace the cooler lights with warmer ones. And now, actually, we have a new system that is going to reduce the intensity after midnight by 30%. To the people perceptions, to the human side perception, doesn't look like much, but this 30% all nights from midnight until dawn is huge energy savings in reducing the light pollution. Something we learn updating the codes is that sometimes precisely the perfection gets in the way. If you try to get it too complicated on the technical aspect, for example, next slide, electronic billboards that are now a big problem, if you set an overly detailed specification, for example, how much light per square inch these electronic billboards will have produced, well, now you have a problem. How are you going to enforce it? Does the city have the equipment to properly measure the lightings? Is it calibrated? Do you have the personnel to run all these measurements at night? Well, if you don't have the answer to all this as a positive, then it's not going to work because it's not going to be possible to force it. Something simpler is just say, after midnight, electronic billboards are shut down. That's much easier to check and much easier to enforce. So yeah, it's been a long process, almost 2 decades of work. And one of the biggest lessons is that you have to be patient. You have to be stubborn. It's not going to happen overnight, but you have to keep pushing. You have to be pushing for a change. You have to be pushing for an improvement. But it's not going to happen. Negotiating, learning that sometimes for external reasons, mostly economical sometimes, is not feasible right now, but maybe in a couple of years will happen. So you're almost there. You take all these ideas, you try to apply them to your local circumstances, and well, look at that. You got your ordinance approved. You will protect the night sky, you will protect the environmental, wildlife. But you know what? That was the easy part. All this work, getting with the media, multidisciplinary community, trying to work with the government, negotiating, showing benefits for everybody, all that was the easy part. Now that you got your ordinance approved, the work really starts because now you have to enforce it. And well, that's an ongoing process. Just remember, be patient, be stubborn. You'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. And thank you for sharing about all the work that you've been doing and ways that we can help. Our next speaker is Meredith Barges. Meredith is a bird-friendly building advocate, a PhD student at State University New York's College of Environmental Science and Forestry, and a board member of the Onondaga Audubon Society. As chair of Lights Out Central New York, she promotes safer lighting and building practices to protect migratory birds. Meredith co-authored Building Safer Cities for Birds and helped lead Connecticut's landmark Lights Out law, saving both birds and energy statewide. Meredith?
Thanks so much. I just want to start off by saying how proud I am to be part of this event and how much World Migratory Bird Day means to me and how excited I was when I saw the theme for this year because that concept of coexistence and shared space is exactly what I focus on in my research and what I do in my advocacy work. So this afternoon, I'm going to be talking about bird-friendly building policies in the US and Canada, doing an overview of the different kinds of ways that these policies are being adopted and to look at who is adopting, or rather like what jurisdictions are adopting them. So many of you may know that bird building collisions are a leading cause of bird mortality in North America. It's estimated that over 1 billion birds are killed every year in the United States after colliding with a building. And I think the figure for Canada is something like over 32 million. And so that makes it one of the leading causes of anthropogenic bird mortality in North America. Now, building collisions occur for several different reasons, but mainly it's because momentarily birds will confuse or they'll misinterpret the images that are on glass for habitat or for other members of their species or even a predator, and they will accidentally fly into what is a solid surface. And it's both the reflectivity of glass and the transparency of glass that causes collisions. And as you can see in this photo, which was taken at McCormick Place, you can see the reflection of the trees of the habitat on the window. And unfortunately, this results in not just fatalities, but also injuries and that the secondary or the delayed death of birds means that we are likely undercounting the number of birds that are dying because 60% of birds that survive the initial impact, they'll die later. We also know that artificial light at night contributes to the problem, the science shows that birds are attracted to artificial light at night. We're not sure exactly why, but a 2021 study at McCormick Place in Chicago found that by turning off 50% of the lights at the window bays, so that's indoor lighting, reduced collision mortalities by 60%. And this further substantiated earlier science and the longstanding practice of linking bird collisions with artificial light in the built environment. Strategies to prevent collisions are readily available, but unfortunately, voluntary uptake, just suggestions to turning off lights, while that can be effective to reduce things marginally, uptake is uneven and they've been insufficient so far to address this massive bird conservation issue. In the United States, no environmental law, including the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and Endangered Species Act, have been interpreted in a way to protect birds from collisions. And they're treated as permissible accidental deaths. But this has left a regulatory void that different subnational governments, that means state and county level and cities, are starting to fill. And that's a really exciting development. Over 30 cities, counties, and states in the United States and Canada have adopted bird-friendly building policies since the first one was adopted in Cook County in 2008. And even before that, actually, the city of Toronto adopted a voluntary incentivized policy in 2006. And you can see from that graph that that there's increasing over time and that there's some spikes in certain years. So what is a bird-friendly building policy? Mainly, it's any kind of a law, a part of a sustainable development plan, a code amendment that sets building standards to reduce building collisions. It regulates the building envelope for reflective materials, or reflective or transparent materials like glass or plexiglass or metal, and And it also can, and typically also includes lighting standards, nighttime lighting standards. There are wide variations in the policies with basically two types of standards. I'm not going to get into this too much, just to know that there's basically two ways that different cities and states are setting these standards. One is prescriptive, as they just literally describe how they want the reflectivity and transparency of glass to be broken up. That's a prescriptive style. And then also the other style is the material threat factor. It's following the system developed by the American Bird Conservancy. And I don't know what the exact breakdown is, but I think it's more than half-half. Some use prescriptive, some use the material threat factor, but the results are the same. It's just different ways to regulate. Next slide, please. But I just want to say before I continue that bird-friendly buildings are diverse and beautiful. These are all examples of bird-friendly buildings, and my background that I have behind me is a bird-friendly building. It's the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. So all of these different regulations and standards result in vastly different, original, all different types of architectures that can incorporate bird-friendly building. Next slide, please. So what entities are adopting bird-friendly buildings? I mentioned before, it's cities, states, counties, and universities. And this is a map that shows all the US cities with bird-friendly building policies. You can notice that there is clustering in the Bay Area, since San Francisco was the first city to adopt a bird-friendly building law in 2010 or 2011 rather. There's a cluster around in the Midwest, and then there's some Maryland and Washington D.C. have it. So you can see that there's real regional differences, and there's obviously pockets of the country where we have no bird-friendly building policies. Next slide. As was mentioned before, I'm the co-author of Building Safer Cities for Birds, and I just want to go over some of the key findings of this report, which includes 5 case studies of U.S. Municipal bird-friendly building laws. And also it came up with some comparative studies. So if you see this report, which is available, Lauren's going to drop that in the chat, but has a set of case studies, and then also and it covers New York City, Madison, Wisconsin, San Francisco as the first, Arlington County, Virginia, which is technically a municipality, and in Cupertino, California. So the first finding was that cities are leading the way on bird-friendly building policymaking. Some policies are more comprehensive than others. At the time when this was published, New York City had the most comprehensive law because it has very few exceptions. Like a lot of the laws will exempt residential buildings or storefronts, whereas now Washington D.C. has the most comprehensive and the best law. They often share the same limitations, and then policymakers, when we were doing the interviews for this report, kept citing the 2019 Science Journal article by Rosenberg et al. Called The Decline of North American Avian Fauna as a motivator, because that was a huge groundbreaking report that found such a large number of birds that were disappearing from the landscape, and that they've realized it wasn't just a local problem, that cities needed to do more to address this major threat to bird populations. That was with some estimates that there was going to be large extinctions of some of the birds affected by bird collisions in the next 50 years. So also some US states are adopting bird-friendly building policies. For instance, Connecticut, I was part of getting the Lights Out bill, and those usually regulate their own buildings and capital projects. So they don't really regulate buildings across the state, just their own state-owned buildings. Some US counties are also, actually the very first bird-friendly building law was at Cook County level, and then also Lake County, Illinois just adopted a bird-friendly building policy. So it can also be done at the county level, and in some states allow for that. Next slide, please. And also, I just want to add, it's maybe not how we think of policy, as a law exactly, but more and more universities are adopting bird-friendly building policies. And this is a map from the Bird Safe Campuses website showing all the different bird-friendly building policies adopted by universities, and this is not even a complete list. But you can see there I have just a screenshot. This is a policy adopted by Yale University, which follows that material threat factor rule. But my university, SUNY ESF, just adopted its own bird-friendly building policy, and then that one actually, because all buildings are required to meet a LEED certification, they just require that all new buildings achieve the LEED credit biodiversity credits, which has a bird-friendly glass point that can be earned in it. So this is an exciting development as well. Next slide, please. And I just want to say throughout that we found in the report that bird collision monitoring data does help convince decision makers, but it's not always necessary. Arlington County and Cupertino, California both passed their bird-friendly building laws without local monitoring data, but it can help, as I've seen in my own advocacy, is that being able to show the photos of birds that have died like on our campus help to convince the university to take action here. This is an example of SUNY ESF. Next slide, please. And also, just to double on to something that Fernando said earlier, is that creative, persistent advocacy is absolutely essential to getting these policies passed. And I just want to name Michael Mazur on the left there from FLAP Canada, who helped really start this field. And he's the one who got that first mandatory bird-friendly building law passed in the city of Toronto, which is the first in North America. And then all different people are just coming from all different disciplines, all different backgrounds, and some of these people aren't even bird watchers. And yet they're coming together to make a difference in the built environment for birds. So I look forward to your questions, and thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Meredith. And yeah, just as a reminder, we will have a question and answer section at the end of the presentation. So if you do have any questions, please drop those into the chat and we will bring them up at the end of the session. Our next speaker is Rika Gopinath, who works as a community policy and action manager with a focus on parks and for a sustainable future program. She brings a wealth of experience, a long history of working at the community level in California, serving as a founding member and chair of Yard Smart Marin and co-founder of Moms Advocating Sustainability, a San Francisco Bay Area organization focused on protecting children from toxins in the home and the environment.
Great. Thank you so much. And first of all, just thank you to Environment of the Americas for including us on this important topic. And while I'm based here remotely in Northern California, I'm representing Beyond Pesticides, our national nonprofit based in DC that has been working for over 40 years to empower people as grassroots advocates to protect both health, environment, and biodiversity through science, policy, and action. And that's what I'm going to focus on with the minutes I have with you today. I do want to just go back to that slide for a quick second, and I'll come back to it at the end. We're here for you, and it's a little unusual, but we do have a phone number and we have an email address, info@beyondpesticides.org. You can actually call if you have questions or need help with issues in your own community around pesticides, including biodiversity and birds. And we're here to help. And we actually work internationally as well. We do have a lot of people who contact us from Canada, Mexico, and beyond. So next slide. We want to jump right in, and we are going to be talking about a lot of bad news that you already are aware of, but really the crisis with birds and the decline of birds is directly driven by pesticide use. And it's not just birds that are being impacted, but of course the whole biodiversity, starting with insects, which birds need to eat. So North America has lost over 3 billion birds since 1970. And really, one of the things that we want to highlight today is neonicotinoid insecticides. It's a mouthful, but you'll often hear people talk about neonics, and it's a type of pesticide or a big category of words. Pesticides is a big term that includes all of the killer chemicals, weed killers, herbicides, insecticides, like specifically neonic insecticides that kill insects, as well as rodenticides, things that kill rodents. And that's important to speak about on this slide because rodent poison kills birds. And California has done a great job in banning a lot of those second generation rodenticides because it's now proven that when you kill a rat, you poison it. And when a bird, like a natural predator or raptor, eats it, it gets secondary poisoning and often dies. And so that's a great policy area to take action on, especially if you're a big lover of raptors like I am. We also are going to turn in a moment to another category of pesticides or neonic insecticides that are called treated seeds. So I'll jump into that in a moment, but that's a really key thing about what's harming birds. In addition, we don't want to leave the topic of pesticides and birds without saying widespread use of pesticides in agricultural settings, especially commercial agriculture, as well as landscape use or in people's yards and homes, in communities, in parks and playgrounds. All of these petrochemical pesticides, usually weed killers, are not just hurting insects and the habitat for birds and pollinators, but they're also risking human health as well as environmental degradation, water pollution, again, unintended consequences with the habitat. So pesticides is a general term that I'll use, but it means all of those killers, weed killers, insecticides. By the way, if you want more information, come to beyondpesticides.org website. One of the key things about our organization is we try and we track the science and policy closely, and we make it easy to access. So you don't have to read the scientific study yourself, but you can link to it and get the takeaways, which I'll show you in a moment. The last thing on this slide is I just also want to invite all of you to attend our remote webinar on October 29th, as well as access previous national webinars that we do each year on these topics about pesticides and how it is a threat to biodiversity, environment, and human health. And the good news is we're about solutions, so we're going to get to that. And yes, I see in the chat lots of key studies, and that is one thing Beyond Pesticides puts a lot of resources into, is tracking all of that continuing mounting scientific evidence and studies about Parkinson's disease is more prevalent for people who live near golf courses. And on this slide, birds and biodiversity. Let's go to the next slide. And I'm just going to spend a quick moment. I want to keep an eye on my time here. A quick moment on pesticide safety in the regulatory framework. Like, why can this happen, especially in the United States where we're based? I think we could spend a whole hour on this, but let me just say, if you haven't been paying attention to pesticide use in Canada, Mexico, or the United States, it really is like the tobacco industry of decades ago. The pesticide industry has taken a lot of pages out of that playbook, and the EPA registration process is not about safety for non-target species as well as humans. And I think the easiest example there is to talk about the fact that companies are only required to provide evidence and studies about the one active ingredient. So last thing I'll say too is just one key issue for Americans. There is also a pesticide legislation currently pending that is going to, if it passes, give pesticide companies protection from legal liability from the harms that their pesticides cause. Think of all those billion and $1 million judgments against Roundup and Monsanto Bayer. This would give them immunity from all of that responsibility. So take action on that. Beyond Pesticides is leading on that. Let's go on to the next one, and I'll just spend a brief second to say this is a really cool scientific study that we covered. It's basically just here to highlight that this is this is not a straightforward topic. There are a lot of indirect effects, and it's complex in the ecosystem, and it makes policy difficult too. So let's turn to one example really quickly, which is treated seeds. I didn't know before I worked at Beyond Pesticides what this was, but basically each one of these little corn seeds is coated in the neonicotinoid insecticide that I mentioned before. It's basically an insect killer. And the challenge is it's not only synthetic and petrochemical, but it doesn't stay on the seed. And just one of those tiny seeds contains enough insecticide to kill a small bird. Not just an insect, but the actual bird. And that is really terrifying when you realize that 95% of total neonic use in the US is from these treated seeds. Now, the biggest challenge is that this insecticide doesn't stay on the seed and the plant, and almost 90 to 95% of it is going elsewhere, the soil, the air, the waterways, where it is absolutely one of the biggest drivers in bird and insect decline. The largest challenge is in the United States. This category of pesticide is absolutely exempt from any kind of regulation by our Environmental Protection Agency. And that is a reflection of big agriculture, conventional agriculture, and also the pesticide companies. One last thing, I know we have a lot of friends from Canada and Mexico here, and I just want to say congratulations, because both Canada and Mexico have gone a lot farther on, especially Canada, on this neonic topic. However, despite proposing that they actually phase it out in agricultural use in 2018 at the Canadian federal level, unfortunately in 2021, that was kind of stepped away from. Happily, there's a lot of provincial policies that have been very proactive on treated seeds, especially in Ontario and also in Quebec. So again, that's the pattern, and we're about to turn to what you can do, and you'll see one of the things Beyond Pesticides believes: take action, start with yourself. Knowledge is power. And that is what we have on our website. We have a couple databases that really make the science accessible so that you can not only inform yourself, but inform others. We have a pesticide-induced database, which kind of you put in symptoms and you can see the scientific studies that link it to pesticide exposure. But we also have a gateway on pesticide hazards where you can look up either a pesticide by active ingredient or the product name. And lastly, we have information on safer alternatives. We're really about empowering you as individuals to protect yourself and your community and habitat, and to be able to organize and take action. The last thing I want to leave you with is some really concrete steps that you can take. First of all, Beyond Pesticides believes strongly that it's not enough just to rely on regulation. We really advocate for shifting the whole system. Let's not just whack-a-mole with one pesticide after the other and try and get them regulated. Let's get off of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers and go towards organic land care. Organic land care eliminates all synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, which is that big category, including weed killers and insecticides and neonics. And here's the good news. The market has spoken. Beyond Pesticides has been doing this for over 40 years and helped create the organic certification system in the US. And the market is driving change. So farmers are changing what they do and protecting habitat and human health and the environment, because we as consumers can vote with our dollars and pesos and say, buy organic. And then the next one over to the right is grow organic, grow your own food, grow your own habitat for pollinators and birds, and do it at the community level. And lastly, act locally and sign up for partnership with us at Beyond Pesticides. I do want to give a quick shout out to the program that I also work on, which is Parks for Sustainable Future. It's a free program for cities in the US that provides 2 years of technical support to help cities change parks into organically managed natural areas. So we get rid of all of the pesticides and synthetic fertilizers. And the most important part is we teach the park staff in cities how to do it and how it can be grown throughout the community. I'll leave it there and look forward to all of your questions.
Thank you so much, Rika. I saw a question in the chat about a lot of the resources that are and links that are coming up in the chat. We'll do our best to collect those and attach those into the video description on YouTube when we upload this webinar section. Our next speaker is Bill Bruce. Bill is the retired Director of Animal and Bylaw Services for the City of Calgary, Canada. A leader in the community-based governance, he developed Calgary's community standards and responsible pet ownership programs, models now used across North America. His work emphasizes education, collaboration, and shared responsibility to build safer, healthier, and more compassionate communities. Joining us from Calgary, Canada, Bill Bruce.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon. So I'll start out really quickly about responsible pet ownership. It's a concept we came up with when I first got involved in the legislative area of the city of Calgary. And looking around the shelter, I'd see these impounded cats and dogs, and every single one of them was a socialized animal. They weren't wild or untamed animals, and made me stop to wonder, why are they in a shelter? And the only one reason is that we don't have a problem with overpopulation or aggressive animals or feral animals. Our problem lies with responsible pet ownership. Previously, legislation always dealt with animal control bylaws and legislation, and we want to focus now on who's really responsible, and that's the human partner in the relationship. So that's a quick backgrounder. So I'm going to move now just about the whole issue of cat licensing and the impact it's had. So how does this relate to wildlife? Focusing on the pet's behavior is on the owner, not on the pet. Primarily, we use a lot of public education, and as Fernando said, make media your friend. They're your best way to contact and change public opinion is through education. And one of the things we learned of this is looking at some of the influence of conflict resolution. You have three things that drive people and what they do: their behaviors, their opinions, and their beliefs or values. So if you go and trying to change opinions, that doesn't work very well. Trying to change people's values, those are given to them by family, by church, by community. You won't change those. But one thing we can change is behavior. If you can change behavior, that's the stepping ladder to changing the other things to make it become a habit. So basically, educate people. What are the rules? Why do we have them? The benefits of the rules. People, especially in Canada, especially in Alberta, aren't good at just doing what they're told. You have to give them the reasons and the benefits, and then you have to actually do performance measurement and reporting to prove that it actually works. Legislation is good. It certainly defines a standard and an outcome, but also provides a consequence for non-compliance. So again, using public education is the most powerful tool to change human behavior. People need to know why, how it will affect them, how it will benefit them. Building knowledgeable citizens. Again, why do we have these rules? Why do we need these rules? How will these rules apply to them? How will they be applied? And what are the consequences? And for us, a lot of times, it's not a ticket. It may be a forced court order to do something. Give people good information that supports making good choices. And all this supports a perception of fairness. And I think that's what people are looking for more and more these days, is a sense of fairness in government, not just being told what to do. Next slide. So coming up with this whole program, we had to really occur to us one day, we've never really told people what a responsible pet owner does. So we came up with 4 principles. And first one is license and permanent identification for your pets. As we say, that's the ticket home. If we know where the animal belongs, we know how to get it back to its owner. And once we've done that, once we can link to the owner, we can start to work on educating them on why. Like, why is your dog out? Well, somebody left the gate open in the backyard. And that's all fine. So we can educate them. Say, you know what, you can get a spring for a couple of bucks at Home Depot that will automatically close the gate as soon as somebody passes through. Next one is spay and neuter pets. That's a huge one to remove the overpopulation problem and basically make for a healthier community and no overpopulation of pets, unwanted, not filling shelters with unwanted pets. The other one's a big one. Responsible pet owner gives the proper training, the physical care, socialization, medical attention, all these things for their companion pets, things that make the animal a healthy, well-balanced, well-socialized companion, and typically doesn't get into a lot of trouble. And the fourth one was not to allow your pets to become a threat or a nuisance in the community. And this one's kind of all-encompassing. It would include the wildlife thing. You don't let your dog in the off-leash areas chase wildlife. That is actually a provincial offense as well. Chase or harass wildlife. You don't allow your cats to roam free in the community and create havoc in the community. You don't allow the barking or the noise issues to disturb your neighbors and create more stress in the community. Next slide. I should have actually, before I retired, they started to work on a fifth principle that talked about ethical procurement of pets, to not get them from bulk breeders, get them from reliable sources, or adopt one that needs a home. So why cat licensing? We got into the cat licensing. It was kind of it was tried in the late 90s, didn't go very well. So we had to look at that and say, well, what are we getting complaints about? And cats stalking birds in backyard feeders was a significant one. People angry about this cat wandering in the yard and harassing the birds. People using your garden as a litter box, another big one. Noise from cats fighting while you're trying to sleep at 2 a.m. And the screaming and howling. That's amazing how noisy they can be. Spraying people's property when they're marking territory, especially during times when the females are in season. These tomcats will roaming. They will spray your house because they want to mark that territory if they sense there's a female in season. Not surprisingly uncommon was people in the warm summer night leaving their patio door open with just a screen on and having the tomcat come by and spray that. Of course, it gets in the house. Cats getting hit by cars. People complaining about dead cats on the road in front of their house. And then, of course, cats being injured by other cats or wildlife, which usually involved, for the pet owner, a trip to the vet, an expensive trip to the vet. Other challenges with cats were in the community was a high euthanasia rate. Too many cats in shelters. Shelters become overcrowded, and they're forced to do euthanasia. Or in other cases, in feral cat colonies, disease can spread through, not treatable. And again, you end up with high euthanasia. In some communities, Calgary's moved a long way from that. They would trap and kill feral cats. What we tended to do here is we would tend to trap feral cats, try to socialize them, if not possible, neuter them and vaccinate them and release them into a cat community where there'd be people in that community that kind of keep an eye on them. Low return to owner rates for nuisance cats. Again, if the cat's unidentified, you don't know who to return it to. So previous attempts, I said in the late 90s, they tried it and they did no public education, no outreach. They just simply, no public consultation. They just simply said, we're going to license cats. And people were not happy with that. So it erupted into quite a thing. So one thing that came out, we learned a lot about these cat myths, we call them. People believe that cats were given freedom to roam the city by a royal order during the days of the plague in England, and alleging that cats solved the problem by killing all the rats. So we knew that wasn't true because most cats wouldn't want to take on a rat. That's why they bred the terrier breeds, because they're better equipped for that. But anyways, we did significant research, found out no such order ever existed. So dispel that myth. Cats control community mice. That was a hard one to research, but we did find some good work done on urban wildlife. And they did a section on that and determined that cats were not a significant predator on mice in the city. And the last one was, of course, that cats need to get out to roam and to hunt. And we knew that's not true because we know from our own experience of inside cats, they actually live longer, are healthier, and you don't have those issues of injuries, wounds, and getting killed. Next slide. So we had to change the public perception on all these things. And as I said, we could prove the cats were not seriously affecting community most populations. And as an aside, we don't have rats in Alberta. We're one of 3 places on Earth that doesn't have rats. And that's a whole other presentation of why that is. But so cats were in effect there. No freedom was ever granted. And indoor cats live an average of twice as long as free roaming cats. So we compared our experience with dogs. So 20 years of building a good licensing program, we had 90% plus compliance to the licensing program. So high compliance, we had a high return to owner rate and a reduction in complaints. So we found that 95% plus live release rate, we'd actually become a no-kill shelter. And of course, our stats on animal aggression, dog bites, like that, dropped way down to extremely low. Next slide, please. So the outcomes. So within 2 years of implementing it, I should say it was interesting when this came up to get it on council's agenda, because every legislation has to pass council, there has to be a public hearing. To get it on there, I had to get a couple of sympathetic aldermen to put a motion forward to request this. And my city manager was very unhappy with that because of the last time they tried cat licensing, over 750 people showed up at council to speak against it. And it was a bit of a gong show. So we used the media for our education here. We did a lot of input into it. And it's interesting, the week before the meeting, the hearing about the bylaw we put forward, the media was touting about the fur is going to fly at City Hall on Tuesday, and there's going to be a cat fight. Interesting enough, because of all the education we did and working with the rescue groups and all the cat interest people, we had 6 people show up at the committee meeting to speak, and 3 were against and 3 were in favor. So needless to say, it passed. And with that, we got the live release rate up to 80% for cats, dropping complaints, reduced feral cats, reducing the colonies. One thing we hadn't thought of that much about, to be honest with you, was a unanticipated drop in dead pickups. We used to have a problem with our street maintenance people are responsible to pick up dead animals, so they would take them to the landfill, to a dead animal or to an animal disposal site. Unfortunately, at one point they did do that to a dog that had a tag on it that blew up in the media. So we set up a program where anything picked up on the road was brought to our shelter so we could scan it for microchips and look for identification. And then we would post lists of missing animals where they were picked up and people could claim their pet. And after this came in, all of a sudden we stopped getting dead cats show up, which was a great visible reduction in seeing roaming cats. I can't remember the last time I saw a roaming cat in my community. And we get these comments from people, even the mayor himself, would comment that I just don't see cats wandering in the community anymore. So the downside of that, of course, is you're seeing the benefit to wildlife is a lot less predation on the natural birds. So we do have very significant bird populations here, and we're on some migration routes, so we see a lot coming through. So all in all, it worked out well to this date. We're still working on those programs and constantly educating the public. I think that was next slide, please. Yep, so that's a real quick 10-minute overview. It's a lot more in detail than that, but that gives you an idea that there are things you can do. And I think the biggest key is you have to work with the public, educate them, change their behavior, and then they will start to change their opinions. And by publicizing this so much, if there is a roaming cat, usually the neighbors will embarrass the owner into complying. If he doesn't, then we do have legislation that covers roaming cats and failure to license. And the fines are significant. They're several $100s. So that's good to be ready for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bill. Yeah, so this is the question and answer portion of the webinar. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat or to use the reaction button at the bottom of your browser to raise your hand and we can call on you and you can ask your question live. But I'll start it off with a question for Fernando. You mentioned the role of media and the importance of media in a lot of your lights out legislation. What is your approach to media? Do you find that the most effective thing is for press releases or television interviews? Like how do you go about bringing media into your conservation work?
Yes, all of the above. The thing that you have to understand precisely is that when you're talking about media, when you're talking about doing outreach education, the first rule is always know your public. So depending which segment you want to reach, there are media that is more oriented to them. Some people like radio, some people like traditional newspapers, others like social media. But yeah, I mean, you have to focus on what are you targeting. But if you have a chance, talk with everybody. As I was saying in my segment, media is always looking for news pieces, things that affect their local situation, wildlife, security. All of them is something that's going to grab their attention. And as I was saying, it's not about complaining, it's also providing a solution. So that's something that media also likes, trying to show how everybody can benefit. So yeah, try to target everybody that wants or maybe doesn't want, but you start building relationships. After you start working with media, suddenly then they are the one asking you for any update. So it's about building these relationships with media in a more deeper sense.
Great, thank you. And persistence, like I think everybody had mentioned.
Yeah, be
Yeah,
stubborn, be patient.
yeah. Lauren and Jose, were there any questions from the chat?
The chat was
No, none
very
that I can see in
lively.
Spanish.
The chat was very lively, and it sounds like a lot of folks are interested in connecting with Beyond Pesticides and the ways that they can either nominate their city or get a better sense of how to integrate some of those action items. So, Rika, if you'd like to share.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yes, I think the easiest way is just to email us at info@beyondpesticides.org. Otherwise, my first name is my email, rika@beyondpesticides.org. There's also on our website, and I put the link up in the chat earlier during the speakers. There is information about our Parks for Sustainable Future program, or if you just Google it, you'll see a lot of press coverage. And basically, just let's start with a conversation. It's not a formal process because, as you might imagine, it's about building both community support and then approaching decision makers to get them on board, because the program doesn't work if the parks officials don't want to, and that is something that we're expert at, helping them get. And somebody asked about invasive species management too. And I think the real key is helping everyone understand that chemical intensive management, either agricultural or in other settings like landscape and public places, it's not the only way to do things. Organic management of land and habitat has come a long, long way. So we can help connect you with the experts that can make it happen in your community, and we'll bring those experts to the cities. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Well, we are just about out of time. And so if there are any extra questions, you can always email us or email our presenters and find the resources available in the video description on YouTube after we upload this. Our next online gathering will be for the closing ceremony of World Migratory Bird Day 2025. We really hope that you can join us for this. It'll be on November 20th at 12 p.m. Mountain Time, and we will be going over all of the events that happened across the Americas and across the world, different flyways, event highlights. We're going to announce our Outstanding Educator Awards, have a behind the scenes look at the art from this year, and we'll also be announcing the theme for 2026. So be sure to sign up for that one. We also just launched our year-end fundraiser for Environment for the Americas. And we're really excited about it because this year we're raising money for our Bird City program. So we're having it with a fun duck race at the end of the year in December, on December 18th. And so you can join this duck race by donating $25, which gets you a duck. And what the money does is it helps fund Bird City registrations throughout Latin America. And you can also provide an event kit so that they can host a World Migratory Bird Day event in their new Bird City. So we really hope that you support us. And if you like webinars like this and other programs that Environment for the Americas does, you can join our flock at environmentamericas.org and find more information and free educational materials at migratorybirdday.org. So once again, thank you to all of our presenters and thank you for joining us. This webinar will be uploaded to YouTube where you can revisit it and find all the links mentioned before. So thank you all and have a good one.